Hello and welcome all to Election Night, Part 5, starting with the primaries tonight. Coming up, we have runoffs in Alabama and Georgia being the main contest here tonight. And other than that, we also have primaries across the state of Oklahoma, including a state question, whether to raise the minimum wage in the state of Oklahoma to $15 an hour, which could be an interesting and potentially somewhat close contest, depending on how things go today, and might tell us a bit more about how the national environment may shape up across the country, because Oklahoma voted for Trump by 30 points, and so if minimum wage is that strong, definitely with a lower propensity environment, then things could get somewhat interesting. But we have runoffs for the United States Senate and governor for the Republicans. Democrats and Republicans both have runoffs for lieutenant governor and secretary of state. For District of Columbia, the House delegate primary is tonight. They are a non-voting delegate, but they do get to, I believe, speak on the floor. Then we also have the mayor, the mayoral primary, which is essentially the general election, considering that it is 90% Democratic there. We also have tonight the U.S. Senate elections primaries for the Democrats and Republicans. The Republican U.S. House 1 primary, the Oklahoma governor primaries, and of course the state question 832, which is to raise the minimum wage to $15, and then Alabama, the runoffs for U.S. Senate for both parties, and then for Republicans, lieutenant governor and attorney general. So all of those are going to be happening up tonight, and so that is going to obviously have some pretty strong effects for November, specifically looking at Georgia, where at this point it seems almost certain that we are going to have John Ossoff be reelected by a likely margin even, but it could be interesting for the governorship, as if Rick Jackson ends up winning, then there's not going to be as strong of a chance, honestly, that that the Republicans are going to be able to hold on to it, as he is not tied to the popular Kemp administration, whereas Burt Jones is. And then you also have, of course, for Senate, you have the runoff here, Mike Collins versus Derek Dooley. Then for the lieutenant governor positions and secretary of state, you also have Georgia superintendent for the Republicans there, a runoff. Washington, D.C., you have the Washington, D.C. mayor primary, and I believe it is open this year. There are all the wards, and so this is going to potentially shape where the Democratic Party is going to go, because this is the most establishment area in the entire country. But you do have some deep progressives in the central part of the state, or of the district. Then we also have for the U.S. House delegate, which, yeah, there's only one, and they are going to lose by like 90 in November. Then we have the when we have wherever the same sort of thing there, where will the Democratic Party go? That direction will be somewhat determined by who ends up winning the election here. Then we go to Alabama statewide. We have the U.S. Senate election primary here. This is essentially the election for who will be the next senator of Alabama, Jared Hudson or Barry Moore, as the Democrats will likely end up losing by about 30 points, but either way, it's still going to end up being a pretty interesting contest. Trump won the state of Alabama by 30.5%. Then let's look at Alabama's lieutenant governor position for the Republicans and the attorney general for the Republicans. All of those are likely to end up winning, even if somehow, by some absolute miracle, because I believe that Alabama doesn't have united tickets where governor and lieutenant governor are on the exact same ballot, I believe. So even if somehow Doug Jones manages to flip the governorship, the Democrats will not win the lieutenant governorship because they don't have anybody like him on that same level of strength. So that is going to be the main focal point for that, where we are basically just going to be seeing who's going to be the next senator, which is basically the de facto election is right here. Then we also look at Oklahoma statewide. We have the Oklahoma elections tonight. and there's a few spots. This is basically the general election for the next senator of Oklahoma. Again, all of these Democrats who are running will basically end up losing by probably about 25 in November. Oklahoma governor could be somewhat interesting, as Oklahoma generally doesn't vote absurdly strong for Republicans on the gubernatorial level. So if there were to be any absurdly insane surprise that could end up coming out of nowhere, I'd say it would probably end up being... It'd probably end up being Oklahoma. And it has also actually voted for Democrats somewhat recently. They had a Democratic governor that they elected in 2006. And I believe they did choose to not... I believe he lost re-election in 2010. It was a brutal year for Democrats across the board. We can check really quick. Yes. First elected in 2002 by 2/3 of a percentage point, re-elected by 33 in 2006. 2006 was a very strong blue year, and the last time that Democrats won statewide in multiple states, including Tennessee, Arkansas. No, 2008 was the last time that Democrats won statewide in Arkansas. Oklahoma, not Kansas, Wyoming. Yeah, so Oklahoma, Tennessee, and Wyoming. The last time the Democrats won statewide in those three states, and they specifically were for governor. So, here we are, obviously, again, looking at these few... real quick. These few contests, the first polls close in about 15 minutes. As you can see on the bottom right, there is a clock down there. Next polls close. I am going to rearrange that. I have a little bit of something coming up on July 1st, so make sure to... I mean, not necessarily be like excited for it, but there's a few changes that are going to happen around there. So probably going to tweak that a little bit. Also work with what's over there. I'm also going to be switching to a new laptop to stream. This is on a desktop currently. So very excited for all of that. A few little upgrades there. So essentially what we're looking at is that we have... Again, multiple contests are coming over the course of the night. The first few that are really going to be coming out, of course, are going to be in Georgia. So those are going to be pretty big right off the bat. Those are the ones that are really the biggest. That's actually going to have the biggest oomph behind it. And so those are going to be the ones that we're going to be watching. We're going to be watching very intently. Of course, we're going to be watching all of them very intently. But as of right now, there's still a little bit left to... say about some of these other ones. Oklahoma congressionals, we have a few for the Republicans there. There are a lot of open contests for the governorships, and then actually finally the 14th district, the special election in California is happening tonight. This is to fill in for the remainder of the term of Eric Swalwell. So that is going to be the one general election that is happening tonight. And, of course, the normal general election is between Aisha Wahab and Melissa Hernandez, and the Democrats are easily going to win that. Oh, wait, it's literally two Democrats against each other. I mean, yeah, they're going to win anyway, but if we look at the... What's the difference? That's the primary? Oh, and this is maybe the primary for okay, yeah, this is the primary for the general election in November. And right now we're having the primary tonight for the special election. So a little bit confusing. I literally just got confused for a second there. But that is all of the contests that are happening tonight. These are the ones on the watch list. Georgia governor for the Republicans, Georgia U.S. Senate for the Republicans, all of them for the Republicans except for Oklahoma governor. Alabama U.S. Senate, Oklahoma U.S. Senate, Oklahoma governor, and Oklahoma governor for the Democrats as well. So all of those are going to be very important races to be watching over the course of the night, and so we're excited to get the poll to see these numbers start coming in. Georgia's a little bit quick. I mean, the big bulk of the votes in some of these heavy counties like Bartow, Cherokee, Cobb, Douglas, right? These ones are the ex-urban Republican heavy counties, and then you have the Democratic heavy counties that are more suburban or urban, like Fulton, Gwinnett, DeKalb, Clayton, Douglas. Those ones don't really start coming in very quickly, but some rural-ish counties start coming in. Generally not too late. Wow, look at that. Just okay. Oh, it just kind of blopped it all together. That's why. The largest expected numbers for Republicans are actually from Cobb County, which is a relatively large suburban county, but hasn't trended hard enough to the right yet. So that makes sense why that's specifically actually larger than Fulton County, even though Fulton County is like twice the size. It's so blue that it just ends up being, slightly smaller in expected vote. But we're going to get better estimates once the actual numbers start coming in about 12 minutes. So nothing has exactly happened yet, but as of right now, again, we are just looking and waiting for the first results to start coming in. So now we do the worst part of election nights, which is mostly just waiting. But in the meantime, this is an open stream, so feel free to ask any questions. And so, I mean, it can involve just generally the 2026 midterms. It can be about general projections or whatever, or, anything. We got about 10 minutes left. So here, again, we have just a few main contests that we're really focused on, and again, Georgia, the first state to close, that will be closing in about 10 minutes now, 10 minutes and 10 seconds. And, I mean, of course, with a little bit of delay on YouTube's end, but I think it's, default added delay is none, and normal latency, so about, 7 seconds. So, but more or less, you guys are basically completely live. And so I don't know. So much has actually come out over the past few weeks as far as election Twitter style simulators. It's almost an arms race at this point in that field, which is actually awesome to see because it ends up opening up a lot. But down to 9 minutes left, and so here, let's quickly open up. Where is it? I don't have it on here. Let's see. And so now down to 8 minutes left before the polls close in Georgia. So the main focus point here is that in Georgia, whoever wins the nomination for governor for the Republican side will contest against Keisha Lance Bottoms, the former former mayor of Atlanta. And so that will end up there we are. Found it finally. Okay. Now if we specifically look at the, oh my word. Okay, if we specifically look at Georgia, and we get a look at what we might end up seeing here. So now, let's look by county, just so this poor old computer does not literally break. As we're down to 7 minutes left. So, specifically what we're looking at here is how will Jon Ossoff win this November? Because it's almost certain that he will at this point. He is a phenomenal fundraiser. He managed to defeat an incumbent, etc., right? And so if we specifically shift this, now you can kind of just shift that, but if we look at the... So now we're looking at is potentially some variant of winning by, as we said, about an 8-point margin right now. So 54% to 46%, that is right about 8 points. And so that is going to be a pretty rough number there for the Republicans. You can see here, right, Fayette County, even Spalding getting a little bit closer. I want to see some reversion probably back on the Black Belt, potentially seeing some more, some more turnout for the typically Democratic demographics. Apparently, I can't quite figure that out where the demographic numbers are. But, so specifically looking at the one statewide state question, which doesn't close for another hour, an hour 5. But, honestly, Oklahoma has had some tendencies. They very, very narrowly, I forget what year it was, but they very narrowly voted to keep Medicaid expansion. I mean, it was like half a point. So to some degree, some progressive policies are popular, even in deep red areas like Oklahoma. And so, of course, we're going to talk about like an even Oklahoma. I don't need to actually make that anymore. I can just find, where is it? Let me see if I can just find it different way here then. And of course, here, as we come down to 5 minutes left, we're going to be hopping over to Georgia as soon as the polls close. But As for right now, quickly looking at something else instead. Oh, wait, didn't he change his name? Elect index. There we go. There it is. Found it. Okay. We specifically zoom in on Georgia, where we're going to be looking at a potential, I'm not quite sure where to, yeah, well, whatever. The fact is that John Ossoff is almost certainly a strong overperformer. If we look at how the current stances are, okay, actually quickly back to that. So I think honestly, something $15 minimum wage is a little bit on the high end. But I mean, a majority of the country agrees that it's not even close that the minimum wage is currently too low at $7.25 an hour. So if it is anything close to that in Oklahoma, they'd probably be about roughly dead even. So with the turnout dynamic, where more conservative voters aren't going to be showing out, then we have a situation where it should pass. Now, I'm not sure quite how popular a $15 minimum wage is specifically. I probably doubt that any polling has been done here that I could even check really quick. But honestly, I think that if anything, it is probably going to narrowly pass by maybe 3 to 4. We're going to see a lot out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, a little bit out of Cleveland, maybe see Comanche go green. Then you also have Cherokee, Payne, right? Those are the ones that generally are like the indicators that more liberal proposition or movement or anything is winning, is if you start breaking in those areas. So if you manage to get to a blue Oklahoma just by straight up shifting the vote, then you have, where's Oklahoma? There it is. If you just move it until it narrowly goes blue, then you look and see that you have Cherokee, Tulsa, Payne, Oklahoma, Cleveland, Comanche. There you go. Those are the big ones. And then Osage, there's a little bit of a city clip that clips over here. But other than that, it's really, just down to those big ones. And then you get a lot more reduced numbers in rurals elsewhere. And then, of course, if that happens, then you basically end up flipping every single state. I mean, it's redder than every single state except for these 4. So, Trump won the state by 35. So, obviously, very Republican state, to say the least. And so now we are, in fact, down to just 20 seconds before the polls close. And so now we are coming down to just a very short bit left until we have the polls closing in the state of Georgia for governor and Senate runoffs. All right, there's really nothing coming in yet. Of course, the polls have just closed, and so we should expect their first results before way too much longer. But that is going to be the first poll closings statewide in the state of Georgia. So there are the polls closed now, and so that is going to be the main focus. You can see now they just switched to saying 0% in. We're going to be watching those carefully, as these contests are going to definitely shape the general in November. Both of those are very consequential elections. Of course, the electability on either side, definitely you want someone who's able to definitely appeal to moderates, because you need to stop all the independent bleeding that you can. It seems a little bit impossible to do much in the state of Georgia at this point in time if you consider the wow, okay. There's a huge bump. Now there was a poll that was only minus 17, which is definitely going to help in a lot of states, but currently it doesn't show there's any have flipped. But look at Georgia, minus 19. then you can see that, clearly it's still a very brutal number for, of course, it's not just it's not just a poll on whether or not you approve of Trump in November. That's not what would happen. But to the point of where they'd be performing well, it's not necessarily a super strong point to see that happen. But now if you look at the current numbers here, you can see that Oklahoma, obviously, very Republican state, and it actually trended pretty hard to the left from 2020 to 2024, mostly from, the growth of the suburban areas like Oklahoma City. And that area, of course, in that general specific region, those are the white non-college educated voters, which aren't shifting as hard to the left, but college educated voters in Oklahoma and Tulsa are kind of moving it a little bit. And if we look specifically at what might possibly end up making things happen in Oklahoma tonight, almost certainly we're going to have a lot more minority vote than usual, right? We're looking at, there goes Oklahoma County, right? And it's the more liberal are going to be showing out. So you're going to end up with a lot more of those numbers. White voters are going to be bluer, and they're also, no, it's actually more so lower turnout for white voters. Not just like that, it's R plus 11. It's actually going to be a lot lower, but they're going to be a lot bluer. Same sort of thing across the board for Hispanic voters, which apparently actually voted for Trump. Interesting. In lower turnout there. Now you're looking at R plus 13 statewide, right? Asian voters, right? Now you're looking at a bigger drop. Now it's R plus 13, right? So where you're looking at, and potentially you're going to get close to like 40% support amongst white voters tonight. Now you're looking at really just waiting for almost anything left at this point. If turnout continues to drop amongst white voters, it would have to be basically 0 for the state to flip. Wow, look at that. Those very light, like pinks. But for the statewide numbers in Oklahoma, you need white voters probably to have about 50% turnout and maybe be like 46% in favor. And then you could potentially end up getting something happening where it might end up passing tonight. But as far as, support for those sorts of things go, I wouldn't be too surprised if it did end up passing. We, again, saw back in, again, I forget what year. I'll actually look it up really quick. Oklahoma Medicaid expansion. Referendum. I can't type, but it's fine. It knows what I want. It was in 2020, state question 802. And it went into effect July 1st, 2021. And, okay, Oklahoma State Question 802. Oklahoma State Question 802. Hopefully we'll get some good map here somewhere. Okay, maybe we can find something here. Oh. It does not have it backed up that far. It does, in fact, appear. No, there is no District 802. What are you talking about? Okay. So apparently it does not have it backed up that far. But they did, in fact, pass it very narrowly. I'll just pull up the Ballotpedia page. And so, as you can see, very, very narrowly, 6,500 votes. But it did pass. by just under 1%. Yes, supported expanding Medicaid eligibility to adults between 18 and 65 whose income is 133% of the poverty level or below, which effectively expanded Medicaid to those with incomes at or below 138% of the federal poverty level under the Affordable Care Act. So basically, they opted into the ACA by 0.98%. And so they did pass it. They actually had opposition from the governor, state representatives, Oklahoma Council of Public Affairs, which challenged the legality of the measure, and yet it did not matter, and they still passed it. So that is this county map again. Oh, what is that one? Pontotoc County. Okay, that's not one that showed up there. That one's R+5 here. But and Canadian is pretty close, but oh well. Much proposal support came from Tulsa and Oklahoma City. Not surprising. That's where like all of the people are. Here you can see this nets 37,000 votes, and this nets 72,000 votes. So that's enough to basically shift the entire rest of the thing there. So, yeah, there we go. So this is potentially what we're going to be looking at tonight in the state of Oklahoma. And what does that do? I do not see anything that it does. But this is potentially what we may look at tonight. This is barely a Democratic win there in the state. Maybe get a little bit less turnout there. Maybe get a little bit more, considering that we're looking at income. Lowest 20% is almost certainly going to heavily favor this measure. Then we're looking at, lower mid, probably a little bit more as well. Middle 20%, maybe not so much, but upper mid, they're generally more high propensity voters, so they're probably not going to have as big of a drop off. And so now you end up something like this, where you end up having a few richer voters in some of these areas turning out to vote. So you end up getting Osage, Muskogee, Okmulgee, and Cherokee, all now being green, which can't change the name of the candidate, but that's probably going to end up being the biggest thing to be watching in Oklahoma for a while. There we are. The first results are now in, and Rick Jackson is ahead of Burt Jones. Literally just flipped or whatever. Anyway, Rick Jackson is ahead by a large amount. This is actually really bad news for the Republicans. Rick Jackson is basically the billionaire. Burt Jones is the lieutenant governor of Georgia. So if he's not able to win tonight, that's pretty disappointing for the Kemp administration at the very end of their term. But also, it is a pretty tough show now that he's the one that is tied to the popular Kemp administration. So now where we're looking at that Jackson might end up defeating Jones, that may make things a bit easier for Keisha Lance Bottoms. And if we specifically look at the U.S. Senate, which has a lot less reporting for some reason, Derek Dooley is defeating Mike Collins relatively handily, and both of those are already elected officials that are losing right now. Mike Collins is a U.S. House representative from, I believe, like this area. Down here was Buddy Carter. So again, if we're looking at how, looking at how it looks weird with the green, with the Democratic vote specifically in not in Oklahoma, in Georgia. Now, Democrats potentially going to win by, a relatively strong amount. Based on what we're looking at, Jon Ossoff does pretty well with the white vote in the state of Georgia. And so I expect that he's probably going to get a very large amount of the black vote. They're probably going to struggle in turnout, though. Then you also have Hispanic voters, which are going to also be pretty low. Hispanic voters are really low turnout voters. And so now you end up with probably about an 8-point margin, which is something that's relatively reasonable for a margin for Jon Ossoff, believe it or not, in November. Currently projected to win by actually 7.9%. So basically right there. This could end up being the county map. Depends on how well he does with black voters, bringing back the black belt here, right? Peach County, Dooley County, those being ones that are really going to be telltale signs of how strong he's doing with minority voters. Kamala Harris lost them by 6 points and 7.7%. So those are going to be, again, winning them by 5 is going to be obviously a strong sign that they're going to go pretty well. Fayette County is almost certainly going to go blue. Now, Keisha Lance Bottoms probably isn't going to do as strong. I think that she'd mostly struggle with the white vote more than anything else. But, still winning by 6 statewide would be a more than acceptable win for the Democrats, considering that the last time that they won a governorship there was a long time ago. They almost won it in 2018, but Stacey Abrams narrowly lost to Brian Kemp. But if we go back to the last time that Democrats won a governorship in the state of Georgia, it was 1998. So it's the last time they won a governorship in South Carolina and Alabama. All 3 of them flipped Republican in 2002. So what is interesting, considering how strong of a year 2002 was for Democrats. And actually, if they had won this, that actually still wouldn't have been the last time that Democrats won statewide in Alabama. So now where you have the problem is if Derek Dooley keeps on performing this well. Obviously, he is doing pretty strong, especially in the Atlanta metro region. It's not as huge for Republicans as it is for Democrats, but it is still an important area. It still has a lot of population. Maybe he'll be able to get a little bit more split ticket performance, but it's really not going to matter too much in the end. Okay, now Mike Collins just took the lead. I'm not quite sure where his vote totals are coming from. Okay, Houston County, Glynn County, Loudness County, that's enough to actually run over the margin in Fulton. And some of these are kind of like trailing off and kind of get beaten by Chatham. But there's still a large amount left. We're really going to be looking for Cobb County, Gwinnett County, DeKalb, Coweta. And then, of course, for governor, then we're looking between still Jackson and Burt Jones. But Burt Jones appears to be basically getting fed the ground right now. Unless he can run up in a lot of these rurals, it appears that he's currently losing in minority-heavy regions to Jackson, and also along the northern part of the state. So unless these start turning around, and Jones is really well with white voters, I think that we're already looking at a pretty rough time for Jones. And so here we may be able to make a projection very quickly. And so, I mean, that's definitely going to hurt the Republicans, because he's not the one that's relatively well-known so far. Already, that could potentially end up making that a little bit stronger of a margin for the Democrats there for Keisha Lance Bottoms. But that is going to, nonetheless, be a contest they're going to have to hope to hold on to. And so it's potentially going to be a little bit more difficult, that's all. It's definitely not impossible. They're probably going to end up, being able to do relatively okay. But, okay, and, I mean, if we look as far as, businessman, he is probably going to end up being the nominee. I mean, if you already look at how just quickly these results have already come in, that he's leading in a lot of the really heavy vote areas, I find it a little bit difficult to find a way that Burt Jones is going to win by any easy amount, right? It's probably going to be a it's going to be difficult. And so, if anything, he's going to need to hope that these are just favorable numbers to Jackson. It might be, I think, George is one of the ones that reports early vote first. So, okay, a lot out of the Atlanta metro region. So again, you kind of got to hope that this is like early vote. That's kind of getting. Yes, it's early vote. There are literally only like 110 election day votes in. So, but unless Jones continues with this margin here, he is not going to win. If he does, 63% of the election day vote to 61% early vote and 61% absentee vote for Rick Jackson, then there is still a chance that he may be able to pull this off. But as of right now, it's still not looking super hopeful. And he may still end up having a little bit difficult of a time. He's going to need a little bit strong of a turnout on election night itself to really be able to get over that hill there. Mike Collins literally ahead by 88 votes right now in the U.S. Senate runoff. Dooley is winning basically in the exact same places that Jackson is, and Collins and Jones appear to be pretty close to each other as well. And just like that, Rick Jackson is leading in the betting markets. Yep. Just don't trust betting markets out of nowhere. They still have no idea what they're talking about. Literally no election day vote has come in yet. And Republicans tend to vote more on election day. So this is what Rick Jackson needs to have a shot at winning, is putting up a lot of numbers for early vote and absentee ballot. But if we want to figure out how much of it is early vote, that's quite a few, but what's the expected turnout, right? What's the expected total turnout in general? If we're looking at 274,000, then you need probably about 300,000 election day votes for Jones to be able to win, which is absolutely possible. I don't remember exactly what we saw for the initial primary. Yeah, look at that. Well over 300,000 votes. So okay, there we go. So there is still more than enough chance for Jones to win. Jackson is completely overpriced. See, this is exactly why you don't trust betting markets. They are completely overpricing Rick Jackson right now, who is only doing very well in the early vote. And so it's going to come down to the votes that are coming up later in the night, the election day votes that are going to definitely help Burt Jones, especially in the Atlanta metro region, where there are probably still a lot of So now we have quite a bit of a time to wait. Of course, I'll answer your questions. It's an open channel, so or open stream. I don't think that there will be any live streams. I mean, first off, after tonight, there's big breaks. There's more primaries next week, but I'm not planning to do a stream. Then there's just a trickling through the majority of summer, over August through July, into August, into September. Then maybe we'll start picking it up when there's the last few ones in September. Then there's nothing through October. And then November 3rd, the general election, I'll be too busy to really answer questions that'll be coming in most likely, except for maybe the beginning and the end. So once we're in the middle of it, and I'm not really gonna be able to focus on anything there. But so that will end up being a closed stream. But Here it is definitely a definitely a hmm. Definitely a bit of a story to wait as far as that goes, but still, Rick Jackson doing well enough. He's getting what he needs to. If Burt Jones can continue that margin, then he should be able to win because Republicans disproportionately vote on election day. So if Burt Jones continues to get 63% or even just narrowly nudging 60%, I think he will be able to win maybe even like 58% or so. Um, just from the very fact of how heavy the election day vote is expected to be. We barely have any election day vote in yet. As you can see, we literally have 115 votes from election day. All the rest of them are absentee ballots or early vote. And so currently Rick Jackson is overpriced in the gambling markets. And so calling them what they are. But either way, whoever ends up winning is probably at this point going to end up losing. There's a chance if Burt Jones does end up winning, there's a chance they get a little bit closer than this to Keisha Lance Bottoms, but she's definitely favored right now. About 5 points. I think if the white vote has a little bit more turnout there, maybe we can end up with something a little bit like this. You can see a little bit of losses in the Eastern region, plus Burke just flipped, but still, honestly, I think right about a 4.5 point margin, somewhat to be expected in Georgia this year. We're probably going to look at like a Harris plus 4 turnout environment to begin with. And so that, on top of people turning against Republicans because it's a year the Republicans are in the White House, you're going to have potentially up to like a 5 point margin in Georgia. And so that's probably going to end up being the end result there. And so, yeah, potentially seeing some result that's similar to this. I bet that turnout is way, way worse than that in Oklahoma tonight. But we may end up seeing something like this. We're going to get a lot more with some poorer voters potentially and voting yes on raising the minimum wage. Those polls will close at 8 p.m. along with the rest of the state of Oklahoma and Alabama, where we will be then waiting for the results for the primary for U.S. Senate, who will be the next senator from the state of Alabama, Barry Moore or Jared Hudson. Hudson was narrowly able to hold on. Was it narrowly? Yes, very narrowly able to hold on for a to get to the runoff against Steve Marshall in the initial election. We made the decision way before they did. And so that is going to end up being a pretty important contest. Now, there is also a runoff for the Democrats, but they are going to end up losing by about 25 points in November. Doesn't matter who they end up nominating. This is not a low enough turnout election. It's a midterm, and there's no absurdly scandal-plagued candidate. And even then, that was even a less polarized environment than we are at right now. So even then, I think if there was a rematch, I don't know that Doug Jones would have won. But again, it's really going to come down to how close it can get, and if it can get really, really close, then that could definitely show some strong suit for what's going to happen next door in Georgia, which is, of course, going to be the big story tonight. 17% in, and Mike Collins is now ahead by 5%, but we do still have a lot left out of the suburbs, so that is still going to have a lot of weight, and whoever can end up leading in those regions is really going to be in a good space. And then we look at governor, where the race is basically neck and neck as we have some more on election day. Ooh, that's going to hurt. Only down to 59% for Burt Jones. He can't really afford to lose much more. Again, this is a very, very small sample size, though. We're looking at like 2,800 votes out of a lot more than that expected. But if he does end up continuing to lose percentage there, he's not going to be able to hold on much longer, and Rick Jackson will be projected the winner before all too much longer. But currently, right now, it is about 3-2, 91,500 to 62,500 votes. About a quarter in already, so there's really not much to say. There's going to be, an absurd amount more. Burt Jones needs a lot more out of Election Day. If this is almost all of the early vote and absentee vote, then Burt Jones will win. But otherwise, it is really just not going to end up being a very nice time for Burt Jones, and Rick Jackson is going to basically kick him around. Rick Jackson, I forget, I think he's like a healthcare executive, I'm pretty sure was his description on Wikipedia. So he is relatively wealthy. He was able to pay a lot. He was actually able to get himself right up into the lead of the primary within just a few weeks. He did narrowly finish below Burt Jones, though, in the final numbers. But, Brad Raffensperger was also part of the Kemp administration. He definitely could have been a good nominee. But you can see here Burt Jones really was able to win all across the rural regions. And so if he's able to replicate that, wrong one. If he's able to replicate that tonight against Jackson, which appears already isn't so, which is already pretty disappointing for Jones there, but especially also not even in his own district, which is pretty rough. I'm pretty sure that's his district. I don't remember where he is 100%. No, he doesn't have a district. He's the lieutenant governor. Duh. Mike Collins is the one with a House district, and it's right there. And so if we go back to that, you can see that he's actually losing his own district. That's weird. Derek Dooley, not doing phenomenally, but he's very, very, very close behind. If he ends up doing very well and putting up very strong numbers in the Atlanta suburbs, then he's probably going to end up winning tonight, even if Collins ends up getting a lot up in the rurals. Yes, generally there are more Republicans in the rurals than in the suburbs, especially as they continue to fly to the left, but it still is going to be potentially enough to not quite, keep... It's going to keep Mike Collins down enough, and it's going to be down to the rurals almost certainly, but if he puts up some strong numbers in the suburbs, then things could get and stay somewhat interesting. And then again, Rick Jackson is probably going to continue to run things up in the Atlanta suburbs, but if Jones can push through in the Election Day vote, which still has a lot left to report, then maybe he's not going to end up doing too well, and Burt Jones could end up catching up to him from behind. So that's probably going to be the largest focus of the So yeah, Trump did endorse Burt Jones, but it appears that he may end up losing. This would be the second Trump endorsee to lose a primary this cycle. And so that's definitely something interesting of note there, which means he doesn't have a stranglehold over the electorate. But it also is important to note that Trump did only win Georgia by 2.2%. And of course, as we saw here, those same voters disapprove him by 19 points. So very left-trending area, specifically with the Atlanta metro region. And again, excuse the color scheming, but you can see, again, a lot out of these areas here are really going to be a nuisance for only 3 points in Gwinnett, or no, in DeKalb. Okay. Yeah, 8 points in Henry, 7 in Fayette, 8 in Newton, those outer ones, 8 in Cobb, 8.6 in Douglas, 7 in Paulding. That makes sense. And Spalding, 7. So I mean, these you're looking at like 40, 48, almost 50-point margin shifts in some of these counties here. And so that's definitely going to be enough to help move it, to flip it for yes tonight, which is definitely the slightly less expected option. But honestly, I think it's probably going to pass by maybe like 3 points or so, which we did, of course, see something. I mean, that's 0.8, so maybe... yeah, maybe something like this. 2.2%, I could see that happening, where you have a strong enough show out from, poorer voters, where you're getting places like Osage, Ocmulgee, Muskogee, Cherokee, right? Whatever G's you want to have. And then some of these outer areas over here, Pontotoc, that one actually voted for Medicaid expansion, so I wouldn't be surprised if in actuality that one did vote there. It appears to be a little bit more progressive than the rest of it might let on. Pottawatomie, very close there. So if you keep nudging the state via whatever methods you want to, maybe squeaking that by, probably actually the most efficient is going to be by nudging the white vote again. Now they actually approve of the measure, where now all of a sudden you not only have Pottawatomie and Pontotoc, but you also have Kay County, where now it's actually passing by 5. I don't quite think it's going to potentially get that high. If it does, that definitely says a lot about that'll definitely say a lot about the environment for this year, and Republicans should be very concerned if this ends up passing by that large of an amount. So definitely a pretty brutal... There goes Pontotoc narrowly. But if we then go back to shifting by income, where it's, going to be a lot lower, I think that low-income voters are really going to be supporting this by a lot. And so they're also going to be turning out less. They're the ones that have the biggest drop-offs in support, or in turnout, when you're looking at the case for... the highest 20% is probably not really going to support much more than usual, and they are going to have a little bit of a drop in turnout, but wealthier voters generally are the ones that turn out the most. So potentially up to 8 points, honestly, and you could actually have a lot of counties voting for, which would be very interesting. Just based on this, though, honestly, I'm not 100% sure if that would end up really coming to fruition there. I honestly doubt that white voters are going to, at the end of the day, end up supporting the measure. Maybe if it's even a no, just by a little bit. You still have plus 7.5 here, and so if you nudge this up a good bit, potentially looking at like 6.6%. Still a lot with poor voters. I really doubt that a lot of these counties are actually going to end up going green. The ones that I'd almost certainly say, I'm just going to finally make a little prediction myself here, where we have yes versus no. And so this is going to be a very, very low stakes one real quick. But honestly, I think that currently yes is favored, not by an absurd amount. I'd say maybe like probably by a little bit more than the a little bit more than the Medicaid expansion one passed by. But honestly, obviously, though, most of the state is going to be being safe. But then you end up getting potentially some relatively large margins out of Oklahoma County, Tulsa County. I don't remember all the county names. Remember the important ones. Rick Jackson currently still ahead by 20 percentage points. If you look at specifically the election day, Burt Jones, there's still very little coming in here. Burt Jones is still leading just barely by enough to be able to end up winning, but he's really going to need to start getting more momentum here in order for that to end up coming out to fruition in the end. He's still struggling a little bit to some degree there. And then also Mike Collins leading by 3 against Derek Dooley, who appears to actually now be struggling in a lot of the rural regions. Dooley needs to start getting a lot more, and it all comes down to Cobb, which is actually has about 46,000 votes expected in the county of Cobb there for the Republicans, and so that will basically make or break the race there. Depends on how large of a margin Dooley can end up getting. He is only down by 4,800 votes, so that is really going to end up determining how things go there. But if you look at that, they're probably going to end up being pretty safe margins as far as that goes in those two counties. You look at Cleveland, which is a little bit more of like a suburban-ish county, more exurban. If we pull up DRA, which I absolutely love DRA. Just throw something quick in here. Don't mind all of the insane projects. Just pull out something Oklahoma. I don't have like any single fair maps of Oklahoma on here. Okay, well, anyway, where you're looking for the if you'll take, there we go. Where you're looking for these, oh yikes, there we go. If you're looking at the numbers here, you can see the county, Oklahoma County. You can see a lot of this is in fact in general, central Oklahoma City. You can see the areas where Trump did, in fact, lose. I'm actually going to use 2024. They don't have it. Trump narrowly lost it. But you have areas up here like Edmond, which are flinging themselves to the left. And so there's, a lot of potential in those areas. Down in Cleveland County, you have Norman, and you have these areas in the middle like Moore, which are definitely left trending. Those areas are probably going to be probably supporting the measure tonight by a relatively strong margin. So that's what we're looking at in Cleveland County. Comanche potentially looking at a safe margin, not by an absurd amount though. Maybe just over it. Lawton is going to be the core, the exurban suburban core. There you can see there's not too much of development here, but there's enough little suburban areas here that, as you can see, some of them actually did vote for Joe Biden in 2020. Some of them very narrowly voted for Trump in that same year, and so these are going to end up being an important point. I wonder if I actually legitimately have no idea how to import data sets here, but it'd be awesome if I could, and if I had one for the Medicaid expansion one, because I'd love to see how the precincts voted. But and you can see Central Lawton. There is a little bit down here. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a minority-heavy precinct. We can actually check real quick. Yep, it's actually a majority black district or precinct, just barely not majority. Plurality though, 47% black. Voted 81% for Biden. So, but yeah, again, there's some areas here that are definitely left trending this area as well. Suburban white voters being the core of that area there. Same sort of thing over here in Cherokee County, where we're looking at Tahlequah. It's not as big there. I mean, you do have like a college there, which its precinct is the one blue precinct in the entire county. Can we scroll back, please? Thank you. But yeah, the county itself voted for Trump by just under 30, so it is a little bit bluer than the state as a whole. And you can see these somewhat light red precincts. They're probably going to end up being green. If we looked at the end of the night, the margin is probably going to be a little bit touchy, but probably close to like 8 points or so in order to end up bringing the state to be green as a whole. Then also looking at some other regions, you can see Tulsa, a lot of southern Tulsa, right, like Broken Arrow area here. These are all red areas that are more exurban in style here. Even though they are like square, it's almost like they're getting ready for it to continue growing. But you can see it's kind of like exurban style, slightly poorer living areas out in the very southern plains. So that's where a lot of the Republican votes come from. Central Tulsa, though, a little bit more urban, suburban style, a little bit wealthier, where you have a bit more Democratic votes out of those regions. And then you have a little bit of spillover into Osage County, but you have Osage Nation there, Native American area, which is probably going to end up helping the numbers there, relatively poorer voters there, maybe get a little bit closer for the margin there. I don't really know if it's going to end up going green, but that's probably going to end up being a relatively close county at the very least. Looking at Payne County, there's another one that could potentially end up going green at the end of the night. Maybe a little bit, probably a little bit closer than that, but it depends on how strong less wealthy voters are going to be voting for the measure. At the end of the night, that's really where it's going to end up coming from. Potentially getting something in Pontotoc, maybe tilt red, maybe tilt green. Again, it voted for Medicaid expansion, so as of right now, I would say it's probably going to be tilt green, but not necessarily sure to any degree there. Custer maybe not as close. Caddo maybe getting a little bit closer there. That has some bluish areas, right? Looking at Anadarko, Chickasha in Grady County doesn't necessarily seem to be really enough to even get it, even close here. I mean, 64 points for Republicans there. But K County, I mean, you have Pottawatomie and Seminole. Maybe Pottawatomie getting a little bit closer. Depends on, again, if we look at where the blue areas are here, then you can see Shawnee area, as far as that goes, is going to be the majority. They're not a single blue precinct, though. But yeah, Central Shawnee. And then we have Okmulgee, which has a Muskogee Nation in it, as well as the city of the same name there. Maybe it'll end up dropping a little bit closer. I mean, you're looking at it pretty green here, but again, it all comes down to how far less wealthy voters are voting for it. If you have something like a income where lowest 20% are voting 58% for it, where they voted for Trump, where only 20% of them voted for Trump, then maybe you're going to end up with a pretty heavy environment for it. If they're voting narrowly against it, which I'd be a little bit surprised by, but not super. They're typically very conservative voters, maybe like 48% for it. Then already you're losing a lot in a lot of these rural areas. Interestingly, Okmulgee goes after Muskogee. Interesting, but yeah, 48% for it. Maybe like this one's probably like 55%. Middle 20%, maybe a little bit more. Upper mid, probably not going to struggle too much with turnout. And then the highest 20%, barely any change. And it's going to be a little bit bluer, but they're not really going to impact things too much because Oklahoma's a very low income state. But there, you could potentially have something like this tonight as well. I'm not so sure about Pontotoc there. This is very heavily dependent on margins for the income earners, but that is going to be potentially what we're seeing tonight in the state of Oklahoma, something potentially like this as well. We're almost certainly going to at least have that down, maybe a little bit more in both of those counties. I'm not really sure about how close Seminole's going to end up being at the end of the night, but, that's just about 7 points, so I'll say maybe it's a little bit closer. Maybe probably about under 6 points or so. Some of these were relatively close for the Medicaid expansion vote too, so I wouldn't be too surprised if anything happens as far as that goes. Maybe that'll end up being red. Depends on how specifically close it ends up getting. Again, here we're looking at about a 2-point margin, so that is definitely going to be a something to watch once the polls close in 15 minutes in the state of Oklahoma, as well as in Alabama. Osage County maybe going to be a little bit less, going to be more of a toss-up sort of area there. And so, obviously, the swing, just solid green. Ian versus 2020, just solid green. Right, like you have to go back to, like, 2004, back when Democrats actually won these counties. I heard Al Gore actually won quite a few counties in eastern Oklahoma. But it appears that, based on a lot, the referendum tonight might outperform Al Gore in the state, will outperform Al Gore in the state of Oklahoma as a whole. There, we're looking at 24 points. So, but the fact that he actually outperformed by up to 37 points in some of these counties in eastern Oklahoma, right? Those eastern Oklahoma counties are heavily ancestrally Democratic, but ancestrally Democratic like the eastern coal fields of Kentucky are ancestrally Democratic, right? So to the point where you're going to have to really, you're really not going to find anybody who's going to be able to win them over anymore. Then, again, down back to the, honestly, I think Pontotoc is going to end up going. Yes. So other than that, though, we're looking at a pretty good cycle for the Democrats here. Got some good hope for them as far as that goes. Muskogee, maybe. I'm not 100% sure, but this is a preliminary low, not necessarily low effort, but like low accuracy, I guess I could say, projection for that's about it as far as that goes. Popping back over to the numbers here, Mike Collins is at a relatively strong margin here against Derek Dooley. Dooley is getting the numbers I think he needs out of Cobb, but election day vote is really heavily going for Collins, and so Derek Dooley needs to start pumping up his margins in those areas in order to be able to keep up. And if we look at the governor race, then Rick Jackson, oh, yeah, that's looking really bad now. Dropping down to like 55% really isn't going to be enough for Jones to be able to persevere and be able to hold on long enough to be able to actually win the contest there. So, if Jones is going to end up winning, then there's very little chance that... Yeah, so Rick Jackson is almost certainly going to end up being the nominee, though. That's going to probably hurt, but... especially in the general, where now it's probably going to end up looking a lot more like this in the state of Georgia. We're looking, again, probably at, a relatively strong margin in the state of Georgia, where... Democrats are probably going to be getting relatively strong numbers with black voters, potentially even probably better than Joe Biden 2020 numbers. What on earth happened there? I don't think that's right. Marengo isn't part of the... Oh, it nearly is. It nearly is, but that's... Okay, that's 3. Yeah, okay. And so that's probably going to end up being the biggest obstacle for Republicans is going to be probably just the general election in general. They're not going to have a strong time, specifically if Jackson wins. But, I mean, as far as almost anything goes, it's really going to be a bummer if they fall short in a state like Georgia. They may end up just doing well enough in general that it's not going to matter, but I expect that, considering Trump disapproval, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it's probably not going to end up. So again, if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them in the live chat. I will be answering any and all questions, as this is an open stream. And so anything from the midterms, or specifically the primary, any contests that you want to see that I do not have on my watch list, anything like that is basically free reigns. So Now, the problem with Rick Jackson is that he's not connected to the popular Kemp administration, and Brian Kemp is very popular. He is terminated in 2026. He's at plus 32 as of March 6th, 2026, at least. I don't know if Morning Consult released their newest update or not, but that is potentially going to be a little bit out of date now. But specifically looking at the numbers there, if Jackson's winning, then they're potentially losing out on a lot of potential strength. Whereas now, especially with election day voting now only being Jones plus 13, we're at a third of the vote reporting, and Jones is barely breaking a third of the vote in the Atlanta metro region, which, again, isn't the heaviest region for Republicans. That's the heaviest region for Democrats. That's where Democrats need to run up numbers in general elections. But that's not the specifically where the fact that first off Jones is not necessarily having any coherent coalition is somewhat concerning there. Where he's performing well and where he's not is like almost just random. From what I can tell, I guarantee there's almost some potential variation there, but as of right now, things are really not looking good for Burt Jones. And so I really would hope, if I were Jones, to be able to get more out of it. But currently, I wouldn't be too hopeful. And I'd definitely more so be Rick Jackson than Burt Jones, just because from the very fact that okay, down to 6 minutes left before the polls close, and so now we are just waiting, and so that's going to be a very big a pretty big one. That's going to be the biggest one tonight, where we are waiting on Oklahoma and Alabama, of course, there's a runoff, but for the U.S. Senate for the Republicans there, where that's going to be between Barry Moore and Jared Hudson, those two winning the original primary and going to a runoff that took place on May 19th. And so already a month ago, jeez. And so it's already been 4 weeks. Wow. Okay. And then we also have Oklahoma, which it's not a runoff, it's just a general, and I'm pretty sure there are no runoffs in Oklahoma. But the big one that we're going to be looking at, which actually is a general, is Oklahoma State Question 832, whether or not they should introduce a $15 minimum wage in the state of Oklahoma. And so, as you can see, it is going to win by what? That's 90%. So it's going to win by 80% based on the emoji reactions on Decision Desk HQ's votes page. So there's the answer. Spoiled it for you. But probably, if anything, it's going to win by a very narrow amount. This, again, is a relatively quickly put together county projection based off of an expected 1.5-point margin for yes. Again, looking at some of these urban-suburban regions, right? Oklahoma City, Comanche, Tulsa, Cherokee, also the reservations in Osage, Muskogee, Okmulgee, and Pontotoc. And so with all of that there, again, it's going to be a pretty difficult road for the progressive vote. But again, it has happened before. Again, as you said, there have been wins for progressive movements before in Oklahoma. For example, Medicaid expansion passed in 2020. And I believe that was in the general election too. No, it wasn't. There's no way it could have been. I think it was in May. But yeah, that's going to be the main focus for that there. Looking at 15-point margin now, and it's really just not getting any better for Burt Jones as of right now. It's just he's just limping along, and so it really does seem like things aren't really going to be getting better for him. He needs a lot stronger in the election day vote than he's getting. I mean, Henry County, that's a bit of a good sign, but like you need more in like Newton, Rockdale, Fayette, Douglas, Cobb, right? Those heavier counties than what he's getting at the moment. And so if he's not getting those numbers, then I don't think he's going to be able to pull it off. At the end of the night, he's going to not end up winning the nomination there. And so that's going to be, sad for him. But Rick Jackson is going to be the nominee there. And honestly, I think, why does it do that? Like, every single time it does that for, like, no reason. I don't understand why. I do not understand why. But yeah, again, Georgia State, the Trump won by 2.2%. He's currently underwater by a good bit there with those same voters, which definitely is not going to end up helping whoever ends up winning here, which is probably going to be Rick Jackson. And so where we're looking at the decision of whether or not this is going to go potentially at all well for the Democrats, I think, or for Republicans, I think the answer is no as of right now. I don't see much of a path for Republicans to win the governorship in Georgia, considering just the expected national environment is already going to be probably like Harris +2 for turnout in the state of Georgia, which is 4.2 to the left of where it was, which makes some sense, right? Lower propensity voters are now Republican, right? And so you do have some disparity across the South. It's not as heavily in favor there, but that is still going to be enough to potentially obviously going to give Democrats the environment edge, and so Republicans are going to need to somehow win over in a Democratic strong environment, which is going to be a bit difficult for them to pull off, especially when Republicans aren't extremely popular with Trump at the top of the ticket. And so now we're down to 30 seconds before the polls close in the states of Alabama and Oklahoma, both of those states having primaries tonight. Alabama being the runoff for Senate between Barry Moore and Jared Hudson. Barry Moore is generally favored in that contest. And then in Oklahoma, U.S. Senate for the Republicans, open field. Oklahoma governor for the Republicans, Oklahoma governor for the Democrats as well, and Oklahoma state question 832 on the minimum wage. The polls close now. We have a projection to make. We can project that Georgia Republicans have nominated Rick Jackson for governor. He will secure this nomination as there's just not enough left of the election day vote, unless there are huge mistakes on how much is remaining in the right places for Jones to end up getting enough votes in the right places to be able to win. And so that is going to be a brutal blow for the Republicans this cycle now, because they were really hoping to end up getting a strong showing, but that is not going to be the case as of right now. And so we also have a key race alert as the polls have just closed. It is too early to call for Oklahoma ballot question 832. Too early to call whether or not the minimum wage should be raised to $15 an hour across the state of Oklahoma. This is going to be a pretty competitive contest across the state of Oklahoma, which usually doesn't happen, but it's a strong enough environment now for Democrats that it is absolutely possible that a liberal thing such as this may end up passing, and so that is going to be a potential win for the Democrats there and liberals. And so here, as you can see, we're looking at the map for Oklahoma, currently blank, but if we do look at the numbers currently for the current projection here, yes, projected to win currently by about 1.5 points. It could end up losing, honestly. The only thing that I'm really basing this off of is the referendum question where they actually did vote for Medicaid expansion back in 2020. I believe it was in May of 2020. So they definitely have approved more liberal-leaning things before, but that is still going to end up being a pretty rough oh my. It's a pretty rough sign nonetheless, that, turnout dynamics are going to be strong enough for liberals and progressives for a progressive movement like that to be able to pass. If we go over to Georgia, where we are currently again looking, we have projected that Rick Jackson will be the nominee because the election day is now only Jones plus 14, and so he needs he needs more than that and he's also not even really putting up enough numbers in the rural areas. The remaining areas are also in a lot from Atlanta, where Jackson's leading by large amounts, and so as of right now, the remaining vote it's going to get closer than it is right now. It is not going to end up being a 15-point margin, but I wouldn't be surprised if Jackson ends up winning by about 10, and so he is going to be the nominee, and he will face Keisha Lance Bottoms in November for governor, and so that is actually probably going to make things a little bit harder for Republicans to hold on to this seat because generally a little bit less popular than someone like Jones, who might be attached to or connected to Kemp, Brian Kemp being the popular governor of Georgia, but that is going to be the projection there for Georgia U.S. Senate. That is still up in the air. Derek Dooley doing very well in the Atlanta metro region. Meanwhile, Collins is winning basically everywhere else, including even some other rural regions like Richmond, Savannah, up near the Chattanooga area. And amongst the black belt across the central part of the state here is also showing pretty strong for Collins, where we do have pretty interesting numbers showing there. Not quite as strong, it doesn't appear, right? But I mean, it's like, 70% versus 60%. So really not too big of a of a show there. And Collins is definitely favored here, though, because there's not as much for Dooley in some of these regions where the votes remaining is actually in Augusta, Savannah, or the Atlanta region. If you have a lot more of these rurals that are going to be showing up, they're probably going to end up showing for Collins, then there's a pretty strong shot that that Collins is going to end up winning, even if Derek Dooley does put up pretty large margins for the numbers there. So there is what we're looking at currently for that. Nothing in yet from Alabama. They actually took a good while to start reporting results. Then Oklahoma, where we have quite a bit out of the central regions that we're really going to be waiting on, right? Remaining votes Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Cleveland County, Canadian County, right? Those are the big ones there that we're going to be waiting on. And so, Republicans, whoever wins this is essentially going to be the next senator from Oklahoma. The competitive election here is going to be, of course, question 832. Kalshi currently puts it as 72% chance of passing. I'd say it's probably closer to like 50-50. I don't know what the fundraising numbers look like, and I don't even know if there's actually been anything done for it. I'm actually going to see if there has been any polling yet. Polling actually has it up by 9. There was a poll done by Cole Hargrave Snodgrass and Associates. A Republican pollster had it up by 6 and then up by 9 with 9% unsure. So honestly, as of right now, it does in fact actually appear that it's going to pass by a relatively higher amount, maybe a little bit more than currently shown to be about 1.9%. And 1.9% wouldn't necessarily be anything absurd, but maybe, maybe D plus 6 or so, yes plus 6, which means you're probably going to be getting a little bit more out of some of these regions that maybe weren't specifically going for yes originally, right? Maybe not Potawatomi, but it's probably going to be getting really, really close. Looking at some of these other counties, right? Caddo County, for example, getting a little bit closer, probably going to actually end up winning in Osage. Then you end up getting Ocmulgee and Muskogee, those being, of course, those Native American reservation areas there. So those are probably going to end up going green as well. Maybe end up getting a little bit more in this area. Depends on how well it ends up doing. But maybe like a 5.5 point margin or so, which is probably what, like 52.5. So 52.3% to 47.7. That is, in fact, actually going to be what, a 4.6% margin. So 4.6% margin in Oklahoma for this wouldn't be at all bad. Let's see, what does it say? 52.3. No, not 5.3, 2.3. There we go, 4.6%. And so, yeah, something like this potentially, right? Potawatomi being tilt Republican, right? Seminole, that's right on the edge, though. Caddo lean, that's actually a lean Canadian. Depends on how strong things go in the central core. I forget where it was, but I did have it up on DRA. Osage may be getting up to a lean margin. Depends on how things go there. It did vote against Medicaid expansion, though. So I'm going to take a little bit of grain of salt, though, because, maybe it's not quite as strong. But anyway, maybe you're actually going to end up having like basically a dead even lowest 20% there for numbers, and then you have potentially lower mid maybe being somewhere a little bit closer to like 55%. Middle 20, generally they're actually the most Republican leaning demographic, so 32.3, right, upper mid, highest. Maybe they're actually not going to be as favorable to this time, right? Maybe they're going to be like 51% for. Why is it not saving? There we go. Which is actually a bit of a right trend from 2024. Maybe lower mid actually isn't as heavy. I don't know. I'm just trying to like tweak it so that this ends up going down to 52.3. That's about close. So there you go. Maybe something like this. We'll actually end up seeing which one's closer. Maybe you end up getting like, that's like 13 points, right? Creek is actually 7. Ofusky, that's actually Okfuskee. Then you have McIntosh, right? So a lot of these are actually likely as well. So I need to kind of go through and like fill a lot of these in there. Ottawa actually is likely as well. So you got a lot of these that are, a lot closer than usual. I mean, they all voted for Trump by safe margins. So Kay County probably end up being tilt. Then you have, Caddo potentially being tilt as well. Custer County being a lot closer. Canadian, that's lean. Carter, that's maybe likely. Right? So getting a lot of these to be a lot closer. And then, yeah. Where is it there it is. There we go. Okay. Something like this, potentially, looking at the end of the night, I wonder where it's actually going to end up being. But, something similar to this, potentially, maybe a little bit more in an area like Pontotoc, which did, of course, vote yes on Medicaid expansion, as we did go over a little bit, but maybe not Potawatomi. A little bit heavier. Cleveland maybe end up being safe. That would be a pretty strong sign for liberals there, though. 9 points there. Payne may be safe. Tulsa is almost certainly safe. Comanche probably end up being safe as well, but that's going to be interesting to see how they may end up going. I don't think it's going to be a superbly heavy yes vote, but that might end up being enough to make an interesting looking map for once, finally. Because if you look at 2024, it's literally the most boring map you could possibly imagine. Safe, all except for Tilt Red in Oklahoma County, which Harris only lost by 4,850 votes. If she'd gotten that many more, she would have won a county in at least one county in every single state. Oklahoma is the only state in the country that did not have a single Republican. Nope, West Virginia. Those two are the only ones that had a single county or county equivalent that did not at least have one go Democratic, and that was only by 1,800. So, but every single other one had at least one county or county equivalent that were Republican. So, as we are currently waiting for those right there, Georgia U.S. Senate, Mike Collins here has been whittling up numbers. He's actually winning the election day vote by a lot, so it's just going to end up getting worse for him. For Dooley at this point, numbers have started dropping across the the metro region. There we go, the metro region, and so honestly, it's really not going to be going too well for him. It's not going to be getting better either. It really hasn't been that long since the polls have closed, and we are still waiting for anything out of there we go. There's something from Oklahoma, potentially. Oh, wow. There's actually a lot out of Oklahoma. Kevin Hearn is going to be the nominee. I'm not going to make an official calling page for it, but he will be the nominee for Senate. He is easily leading, and yeah, I mean, they actually got that right, but it didn't appear that it was going to be too difficult to get right in the first place. 7% reporting. That's probably just due to low sample size. I think he's probably going to end up winning easily every single county all the way across the board. And we actually have a projection to make now at 8:14 p.m. on the East Coast. We can project that Mike Collins will be the nominee for Senate for the Republicans in the state of Georgia. And so he will face off against Jon Ossoff, the current incumbent senator from the state of Georgia, in November. Again, Mike Collins, the House representative from the state of Georgia, specifically of the 10th Congressional District, will be the Senate nominee and will face Jon Ossoff in the general election in November. We can make this projection now at 8:14 p.m. on the East Coast, now 8:15. And so here we are looking again, and we don't have anything in from any of the new states yet, other than that one drop from Oklahoma, which really does actually have a lot for the Republican Senate. But there we go. There's something. And there we go. Oklahoma state question 832. So Oklahoma currently looking at 30 points yes, Tulsa 15. So that is actually just about on par for a 5-point win for yes. If we look at some of these other counties, right, Texas County, 22% yes. Oh, okay, 39. So that's a little bit on the low end. Osage, 41%. That's a little bit on the low end. So it might actually end up being, as of right now, this might end up failing. Okay, Oklahoma governor, Cindy Munson, easily leading right now. There's no real contest as far as that goes. Munson is going to be the nominee for Oklahoma governor. I see no contest with that. Kevin Hern is going to be the nominee for U.S. Senate for the Republicans. Then we go to Oklahoma governor. Now, Gentner Drummond is currently leading. It is very close against Mike Mazzei. I don't know which one it is. Actually, if anyone does know, that'd be phenomenal, and so please let me know. But currently, very close contest there. Basically, just throwing random colors on the board. It looks like a 5-year-old just flicked a paintbrush over the board with some colors on it. So no real understanding of where coalitions are quite yet. Alabama still has not dropped any votes yet. Barrymore or Jared Hudson could end up being the next nominee. But yeah, I'm really just going to be keeping tabs on this. But Rick Jackson will be the nominee, and so will Mike Collins. So yeah, Rick Jackson is... Yeah, Burt Jones, that's not enough. A 14-point margin in the election day vote. 12-point margin in the election day vote is not enough. He's going to start making it closer, but it's really not going to end up being enough. He's down by 14. So, honestly, I think that unless he somehow pulls off a miracle in the Atlanta metro region, it's really going to be a... Okay, now No is the leader in Oklahoma. We're getting a lot more to the rural regions. Comanche is a yes. Cherokee is a yes. Those are both important counties there. But Caddo is no by a lot. Washita is no by a lot. Nothing yet in Pontotoc. These are all important counties to be watching. Muskogee is a no. McIntosh, no. Ocmulgee, no. Again, all of those are counties that should be pretty close, whether one way or the other, for this to end up passing. Currently, again, that very low confidence projection of about 5 points. But depends on, again, how things go for, how strong the polling was. It probably wasn't a super high effort poll, but... That's going to end up being an important thing to see as far as that goes. Is how well will it do in these urbanish ones? Oklahoma is going to be the big heavy one, followed by Tulsa. It needs a lot of push from that there. Adair County by 12. Is it any of these ones that should be a little bit closer? Because if it is, then maybe they're running into some issues. If not, then maybe not. It does not appear so. So where is Adair County? Oh, wow, it actually breaks it down by vote method too. Election day has not come in yet, so it depends on how things go with election day, but if it's more Republican than it is right now, this will fail. So currently it is hanging on by a thread. Yeah, not a single bit of election day. Early vote is... absentee ballot is yes plus 20, but early vote is no plus 6. So it may end up... If the election day is strong enough for... Yeah, that's really going to end up being... big loss for progressives in the state. Interestingly, I think it was like last week, Democrats actually were leading in new voter registrations for the first time, like in decades. So they have some momentum. It's just not going to be enough to really do much. And so if they can't even pull this together, then that's really going to end up hurting. So if they can't manage to pass this, which seems relatively inoffensive, and I mean they again they got to get the basically Obamacare passed. They basically codified the ADA in 2020, where they couldn't get this. Then that definitely doesn't bode too well for their future prospects. Things are reporting pretty quickly in Oklahoma, and nothing in yet for Election Day. Democrats are hoping that it's going to be a lot more progressive leaning there, but it's going to be down to Election Day at this point. No is leading by 5. Oklahoma governor for the Republicans is looking very, very close. Drummond is narrowly leading. Let me look at Alabama Senate here. Barry Moore is leading by 8 votes out of 98. So really not much to say out of that right now, but that is still something, I guess. And so nothing to be able to make any get anything out of, but that is going to end up yeah, that's going to end up being an important contest, because basically this is, again, because Alabama is such a Republican state, it voted for Trump by 30.5 percentage points. Whoever wins this is likely to be the almost absolutely certain to be the next senator from the state of Alabama. And so it really doesn't matter. There we are. Who the Democrats nominated. I'm pretty sure they did nominate someone just with a quick run through or whatever, and they didn't need anything for it. But yeah, I don't 100% remember, but yeah. It doesn't matter whether it was or wasn't at that point. Nope, there actually is a runoff tonight. Everett Weiss is leading, but very narrowly. It really doesn't matter by that much right now. Literally leading by 1 vote. So again, it's not gonna be that's not a very consequential contest. This one is, because this again is, as I basically just said, almost the general election, right? This is almost the general election in and of itself. So this is basically the contest for who will be the next senator of Alabama, because Democrats do not only not have just the ground game, but also like just the stark partisanship. Again, Trump won it by 30.5 points in 2024, and so that's going to be basically an insurmountable hill for Democrats to try to potentially be able to really do much of anything in, honestly. And so now we're looking at no for Oklahoma State question still is leading, and it's not really getting much better either. Election Day, no by, oh wow. Okay, so if Election Day stays anything close to that, then it will in fact fail. And it's not even going to be that close either. This was probably actually a complete overestimation. The polls there were relatively off. It turns out the Republican turnout's actually a lot higher than it expected. Well, you actually got a lot more red hearts now than it had been for quite a while. I remember it was 18-2 not that long ago. That's why I said the joke that it passed by 80%. What would a D plus 80 Oklahoma look like? I'm just going to reset and then select Oklahoma and make it plus 80, which is going to be 90 and 10. There we go. Let's see. Every single county is green. Okay. I guess that makes sense, but yeah. Oklahoma. Basically just everything, man. 0. Nope, it does not. It does not care. Okay, well, yeah. So that's what a D plus 80 Oklahoma looks like. Very boring, actually. But yeah, it appears that's not going to come to fruition. More no vote is starting to pour in here, and we're looking at election day vote, which we only have about 700 votes for so far, but it is 73-27, which is more than enough to defeat the measure, even though the mail-in vote is looking pretty strong. Oh wow, absentee ballots down to yes plus 15. It's really not looking too strong there. Unless something very drastically changes, this is going to fail. If we're looking at Payne, yeah, there's like no shot. Not quite to the point where we can say that it is in fact going to fail, but it's really not looking that strong right now. And so yeah, yes, it needs to get a lot larger numbers in the all of these counties and stop losing in the ones that it shouldn't be. Which, you know, are like Osage, Washington. I think I missed Washington. Washington is usually no. Should at least be likely though. Then you have the fact of, yeah, it's really not looking good. Cleveland, only yes plus 11. That's not enough to pass something, in Oklahoma if it's a liberal, measure. I think this is almost certainly going to fail. I'm saying about an 80% chance it's going to fail as of right now, which isn't enough, but, yeah. Oklahoma governor for the Republicans currently, Genther Drummond is narrowly ahead still. Mike Mazzei is very close in second, but still currently very close there for that. But, wow, really not doing too hot. Okay. And where we now have quite a bit of a geez, Alabama State Senate, basically still nothing in yet. You just have a few little things in there remaining. A lot of it's still out of Jefferson County, out of Madison County, out of Mobile and Baldwin. Baldwin is a really, really Republican county. It's kind of like Pensacola area right out there. It's a relatively large county, but it's still pretty Republican, unlike Mobile, which is way bigger than it is. But it's because it's bigger, it basically has the same amount of Republicans. Then you have along the Black Belt where you have one county. Hudson might be winning with minority voters. He might not be. Who knows? We literally have like nothing in yet. So 461 votes. And we don't even know where on earth they're from. They're not even trying to guess. We need a little bit more of a drop from Election Day to confirm its fate, but as of right now, no is heavily favored. In the Senate, Collins is actually creeping inward on the, yeah, he's winning Election Day, so he's creeping in on the Atlanta metro region. I think he flipped Henry, Spalding, and Fayette counties since we last looked here. Also Barrow County, Bartow, Pickens, Dawson, Banks, which is now basically done. So all of those in the metro region are basically done. Quick reminder for anyone here, if you're not subscribed, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We do midterm related stuff plenty, and so make sure to subscribe, don't miss any future content like this. And so Currently had my 9. That's probably going to creep up as we end up getting more of a percentage here coming in. That's going to be for Collins. I'd expect that probably by the end he's going to be winning by about 12 to maybe 15 points. I wouldn't quite say up all the way as high as 15, but he's going to do pretty well there. From a general, in general, probably more so about 14 points or so if I had to take a random guess there. Oklahoma governor, pretty contested. There's still waiting for a lot. The breakdown, basically dead split on election day, but there's basically not really much of a sample size there yet. Early vote, basically dead split. Little bit of a lead on absentee ballots for Drummond. That appears to be where his entire lead is from. The other two vote forms are basically dead tied. There you have, as far as that goes, that's done there. Rick Jackson still holding on a little bit, but, again, as Burt Jones now is only down to a 10-point lead in the election day vote, that margin's going to narrow, but not by close to enough. And so you end up having Henry County flipping, but I don't even think that he's going to get another one in the Atlanta metro region on his side. Maybe Spalding, but that's already 51% in, so probably not, and it's really not going to be enough for him. He's probably going to end up flipping like Glynn County, maybe not Tift because it's basically done. He's not even getting Burke, which is like in outer Augusta County. Rick Jackson is going to be the nominee. We made that projection a little while ago. And so with that there out of the way, let's look at some other ones that are happening. Oklahoma congressionals, Oklahoma House 1. Lamire is currently narrowly leading Mark Tedford by 120 votes. This is the Tulsa area one, which is this one right here. Won by Hearn by 26%. I believe Hearn is running for governor, right? I'm pretty sure we literally saw Hearn right here. No? Okay. I might just be going insane. I'm not 100% sure. Lieutenant governor, here we have a contest here. Probably almost certainly going to be Shannon. Then for attorney general, we have probably going to be John Eccles right now based on how things are going. Sterling only really appears to be doing well in the panhandle, if anything. So that appears to be his only base. The Senate, of course, probably going to be Thomas, but depends on how things continue going. In the urban regions is almost where like the entirety of the Democratic base is in Oklahoma. There's like 15 Democrats in total outside of Tulsa and Oklahoma counties. I turn to the fact that Thomas is leading by large amounts in all of these urban regions. She is definitely favored right now in the polls there. So that is going to be a quick thing there. That's neat. And so Oklahoma governor, again, as we said, Munson's easily going to win that. I mean, she's really winning every single county, tying with 2 votes in Cinnamon, but whatever. Attorney general is going to be probably, again, John Eccles. So then we look at California, which does close at 11 p.m., which, I mean, we're probably only going to go till like 11 at latest. We have, so there's no, I'm not going to be really carrying this, but this is the primary for the special election here. This is probably going to be between 2 Democrats. And considering the fact that the official primary was between Wahab and Fernandez, I actually wouldn't be too surprised if it ends up being Hernandez and Wahab again. Just based on, this is a very Democratic district. This is Eric Swalwell's district, one of the bluest in the entire state of California, even the outer San Francisco Bay Area. And so that will end up happening, but after I've signed off already. So there, a little bit for that there. And so I've actually decided now I'm going to be off at probably going to end somewhere around like 10-ish. I don't know. Probably more, at least 90 minutes more, whatever. Governor, again, Rick Jackson. Now we're up to 62% in. And again, Burt Jones is not able to whittle away at enough in the Atlanta region. This was surplus given by early vote and absentee ballots, which Election day is still coming in. I think almost all of the early vote has come in by this point, but we're still awaiting anything else from the election day, which is going to lean towards Jones. So Jackson's going to win by less than 10, but currently it's really not looking too absurdly strong for them there as far as that goes. It's really not going to be a good case there. So Oklahoma governor for the Republicans. Currently still going relatively strong-ish for... interestingly, that's McCall is doing pretty well in the southeastern part of the state here. And so, got some regional support. It does appear that tends to happen in some primaries where you end up like going out and door knocking, and so you end up being a bit more recognizable in those areas. But where you have a a difficult, environment like this where it's probably a lot of few small candidates here where you're getting like 6,000 votes. It's going to be down to the regional support of who recognizes you at that point, right? You're really not going to, it's not going to be, specifically coalitions. It's more like, oh, hey, these people know who I am, so they might vote for me. It's more local level politics instead of larger ones. Even though whoever wins this is probably going to end up being the nominee, or whoever wins is going to end up being the governor. Cindy Munson has been projected the winner as of 3 minutes ago by DDHQ. Didn't really officially make a projection, but did do it a while ago. If anything. Collins, Rick Jackson is the winner there. They have not made a projection, but we did a while back at this point. I mean, not like a while back, but, long enough ago that it's... Ooh. That early vote's not looking too strong. Election day is now no plus 20. So it appears that right now no vote is actually plus 20. Absentee ballot is down to yes plus 14. And early vote is no plus 14 as well. So that is essentially going to be the brutal death sentence for this. Just have to wait a little bit longer for some more election day votes. We're up to like 17,000, but I want to wait at least a little bit longer for some more numbers here. But yeah, this turns out to not happen tonight. This was a little bit bullish on it apparently, but that is going to be pretty brutal for the Liberals, depending on how large this ends up being. I don't know why on earth they don't have these running for, like, anything. But yeah, that's going to end up really being a brutal showing for the Liberals of Oklahoma, of which there's, like, 30 of them. And, I mean, not like really though. I mean, Kamala Harris received just under 500,000 votes in Oklahoma. So that's you can say, oh yeah, that's whatever, right? She received 499,599 votes. That's more votes than she received in New Mexico. So it's eventually, you say that it is, there are people out there who would probably vote yes. The answer that the fact that it is now I think it just dropped. The lead just dropped a little bit. There we go. Yep, Pontotoc came in, but it appears that is only barely coming in there. I mean, yes, is going to drop down in those margins, and so you end up with a Woodward is like completely in though, right? You see a remaining vote, very little in some of these regions. Expected remaining vote 0. So based on the remaining vote alone, it appears that yes might win. But I mean, I'm only so good at like adding up the sizes of bubbles in my head. But yeah, it's gonna really be down to who could end up leading their Oklahoma governor. Still looking at Drummond narrowly leading. I'm gonna take a really quick break. But you guys keep watch on the Oklahoma governor's contest, and we'll be back real soon. I'm gonna quickly put up some. There we are. Oh, it's not there. That would make sense. Okay. So clearly, I mean, there's again some. I mean, we're up to 9% here, pretty heavily. Rating on only Latimer County to actually drop anything yet, but these numbers aren't looking too bad. For yes, but they need to actually have the election day vote go more in their favor as it goes on in order for it to pass. But it's not impossible. But just difficult. Then Alabama U.S. Senate here, we're looking at Barrymore narrowly leading with about 1% of the vote in, and so I'm going to be back shortly. All right, and so what we're looking at again is for specifically Alabama. Barrymore now starting to pull together some more, some more votes from the main chunks. I mean, it's kind of like scattered across the state. There's no real pattern per se, but I mean, it's definitely getting votes is good, basically, and so we still have a lot left from, from Jefferson, from Mobile, from Baldwin, from Madison. Those are the big ones that we're still going to be waiting on. But yeah, this is not looking good for liberals there, and so, okay, Payne just flipped. We're looking at now no plus 17. Excuse me, go to the U.S. Senate there, and so, yep. Collins is still making more inroads against this area there. Jackson is now down to 8 points in lead there. Jones has gotten Henry and Spalding, starting to whittle a little bit down in Fayette. But I think there still is going to be enough. And look, there's a lot of vote remaining in these areas that are at least going to be like 55-45 for Jackson. And so that's still going to be enough to hold him over that 50% threshold there to be able to secure the victory there. And so now at 8:49 p.m. on the East Coast, we have a projection to make. We can project the state of Oklahoma will reject State Question 832. There will not be a $15 minimum wage in the state of Oklahoma, and this is mostly from the huge deficit in the Election Day vote that Yes faces, and currently already being down by 11 points. Again, the constitutional question to enforce a $15 an hour minimum wage in the state of Oklahoma has failed, and we made this projection 8:48 p.m. on the East Coast. So, there we have what is a relatively bit of a blow there for liberals, especially considering how blue of a year it's probably going to end up being. And so now that we're looking at something like that, I mean, honestly, it's really just going to be a pretty tough cycle. Potentially for liberals, even in a state like Oklahoma, where they're probably going to end up doing relatively well. But apparently it's not enough. But yeah, John Ossoff is easily going to win re-election when it comes to November. So the fact that it ended up being a victory for Mike Collins or Derek Dooley really didn't matter. Rick Jackson is now ahead by just under 8.5 percentage points. That margin is continuing to slide, but it's still going to end up being enough that it is going to end up winning nonetheless. And so there's not much to say as far as those go. And oops. There we go. So here, which way, like, I don't know. Just completely. Anyway. Looking specifically at where, you know, the vote is coming from here, it really doesn't say too much. Again, it appears to be more randomized. This is not going to come to fruition, unfortunately, for the liberals of the state of Oklahoma, who are hopefully maybe hoping to have one of the highest minimum wages in the country. If we look at the minimum... Okay, as of January 1st. Okay, so just less than Oregon. But currently it is 725 in Oklahoma, so anything would be a step up. It would be tied with Missouri, which was also by constitutional amendment there, Nebraska, Illinois, Delaware, Massachusetts. Yeah, New Hampshire 725, Pennsylvania 725, Kentucky, Indiana, North Carolina, Tennessee, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Iowa, Wisconsin, North Dakota, Wyoming, Idaho, and Utah. Oh. Why did it start so zoomed in? But yeah, it would be higher than actually a majority of states. And so that would be interesting to see, but in fact, it will not end up passing. It is currently down by, wow, 12% now and still dropping. There's really no shot that's going to end up dropping. You still have a lot of remaining vote there. I think it's probably going to end up failing by only about 12, but still going to be a loss for the Liberals anyway. Then you go to Barry Moore, who's leading by 21% currently, with only 6% of the vote in. So there's still a lot left there. Specifically, now we're just mostly waiting on Alabama. This is going to be Jackson still. I mean, they're probably waiting because they want to be sure the election day is gonna. But it's now it's down to 9 for Jones. I really don't think that there's enough numbers anywhere that it's gonna end up being, you know, any hidden vote somewhere for Jones to be able to pick up enough from Jackson. I mean, he's pulling off in like Augusta, Savannah area, randomly Camden County, even though it's like in the middle of Jones area. Um, Yeah, it's just fun seeing, like, blatantly obvious, just complete regional appeal. I mean, Drummond appears to be, like, filling in statewide just about everywhere, which is how he's leading. Mezzi appears to be doing well on the Eastern Bloc, but then you have McCall doing well on, like, this band right here. You have Merrick, who's got these four, and then randomly Cimarron County, just for fun. Keating down here. Like, and then randomly Hughes County. Like, it's just fun to see these regional appeal candidates. And there's Merrick and Grady County, too. Yeah, so Collins is continuing to expand his lead. Election day is heavily for him there. Potentially gonna flip Troop. Gonna flip Troop County. Probably Meriwether. Paulding. So, forgetting margins. I'm gonna do the same theme they have here. No, shush. Forgetting margins here. No. Forgot to do that. There we go. Dooley is going to end up winning these guys because they are just heavily urbanized areas, right? Gwinnett's probably going to end up going for Dooley as well. You got Rockdale. You got, actually not Henry. Henry flipped. And you have some down here randomly. Coweta might hold for him. Probably not, though. Douglas, maybe. And then you get randomly Cherokee, which is about 5 points. I don't know if it's going to end up shifting by up to 5. I mean, you have a quarter of the vote in, and it's basically probably all election day, so maybe. But Forsyth, I think, is probably going to end up sticking around for Dooley. But then you're getting up to, like, Hall area, where it's more conservative, and I think those are probably not going to end up holding. Clark County is going to end up going for Dooley. And then probably Oconee. Yeah, Oconee is basically completely in, so that's going to be for him there as well. Walton, I mean, 70% in, so probably, but 24% in, that's going to end up flipping. I'm going to end up flipping because it's literally yellow by 1 vote. 42% in, that's going to end up flipping. Paulding is going to flip. Cherokee, no, that's got too much left. Hall probably actually isn't because it has too much of the vote in. It might, though. So this is probably about what the county maps ended up being, ignoring margins. 147 to 12. And so I think, honestly, Collins is going to win by 14 points at the end of the night there for that, as far as that goes. And then for the... Why does it do that? No, Derek Dooley is not the toss-up. It's a little confused. And then for governor, a little bit more complicated because you got some random ones out here for Burt Jones. But, yellow is Burt Jones. And this is Rick Jackson, who is officially the Republican nominee. Oops. There we go. There we go. Okay. And so now I'm going to start filling this in. I'm going to snag this over here so I can do both at the same time. There's that Jackson's leading in more than Jones is, but then you got these guys up here. And Burt Jones is, again, narrowly leading in Election Day by about 9 points, so he might be able to whittle down a little bit in some of these areas that he's currently losing in, but I really don't see him able to get enough traction that he's going to end up changing anything drastic. He's probably going to end up losing by a relatively lowish amount, but still, he is going to end up losing. Again, we made that projection now about an hour ago. Oh, okay. The map's projections are a little bit off from each other. Yeah, that's going to end up flipping those. There, this guy all down here. Like all down here. There we go. Wow, very oof. But now you can see the county lines. That's nice. That one's probably gonna end up narrowly holding because it's basically all the way in. Same thing for that one, even though they're pretty close. Oh wow, Jones narrowly pulled out a victory in Cook County. Berrien's probably done. Ben Hill's too far in at this point. Irwin's done. Dodge is done. All of these guys basically are done. Houston and Macon did narrowly flip. Then you also got these three are probably ended up holding for him. That one's close, but it's basically done. Stewart might flip, but really depends on how many votes are outstanding. Charlton's actually yellow. Then you gotta wait for... You gotta wait for what now? What other counties have flipped at this point? That one's at 95% in, so that's done. Actually, that's not going to be able to flip. It's basically done. I mean, we're just waiting for a few more out of Fayette. I don't know if that'll end up going. Nope, wait, hold on. Morgan and Green are basically done reporting. Newton is basically done reporting. So some of these are guesses just based off of like the shape of the state there. Montgomery might be yellow. It might be red. Unsure. That's this one right there. That is none reporting as of right now. So I am going to actually leave the ones with no votes reporting currently as toss-up because I legitimately have no idea how they could end up going. Nothing to base it off of necessarily. I don't want to just base it off of the current trajectory in some other places. So that's going to be the current map prediction for our friends there for governor. Rick Jackson winning a narrow majority of counties. Here you can see still got a few counties that actually haven't reported anything yet, so I'm not going to pretend to know what's going on there. You got this one again. You got this one randomly, Lawrence County. You got Montgomery. You got that one, and that one. Okay. There we go. So, essentially, that's what we're looking at now. Jackson's down to 7-point lead here, but he is still, again, still narrowly gaining a little bit in the election day vote. And so, yeah. Definitely Collins is winning by more than... but they have a couple of different coalitions. You can see here, Dooley basically just won the urbanized regions and heavily with the few... Let's be honest here, the few minority conservatives that exist in the state of Georgia. Or basically anywhere, but, you know. The urban regions in here. Also, again, was doing a little bit better in Richmond and Savannah, but not enough to really, like, show up. Again, this is ignoring margins. Meanwhile, you have Burt Jones, just whatever this is. Rick Jackson winning the urbanized areas, and then across some of the Black Belt, but this area in here, I really don't know. I think these are a little bit more white heavy counties in that stripe right there, but not necessarily 100% sure on what that is about there. So currently just awaiting for anything else to really happen. Still waiting mostly on Alabama's U.S. Senate contest, where Barry Moore is now definitely pulling ahead. Only 14% of the vote is in, though, and so there's still a lot left to potentially come in. And Jared Hudson is, in fact, winning in Jefferson County, but all the other large counties are actually coming in from Barry Moore, so that may end up solidifying his victory here tonight. Again, Barry Moore really is going to, if he continues to get numbers like that across the rest of the belt here, then he's basically completely solidified for a victory here tonight. Dooley and Jones are basically just like done already. Mike Collins and Rick Jackson have won. Should probably swap their order to show the winner first. Just because that, makes more sense there. Makes it a little more clear who won. I mean, this one's not very difficult to see, but this one might be a little more confusing, but this is Republican v. Republican, so it is going to, it's just going to be a little bit of a win for the red color, depending on how strong margins are in, the urban areas there. Wrong one. So apparently when nobody was looking, they called it for Rick Jackson. It's about time. We beat you to it by about an hour. But, yeah. Not surprised. It's kind of weird that this county... did it come in now? Lawrence County? Yes, it did. Mike Collins heavily leading there. This one right there, that appears to be a Mike Collins County as well. And so now we just have those four, which are being stubborn holdouts on both. So I expect for Senate, at least Mike Collins is going to win all four of them, just based off of patterns that we can see here that are somewhat obvious. Because, I mean, the only places that Dooley is actually winning in is the immediate Atlanta metro region. But if you look, again, where the specific numbers are in these areas, he's probably not going to end up pulling any more here. Yeah, he's basically done as far as that goes. Clayton is almost done. Walton might. I'm unsure about Walton. As of right now, I do have that narrowly red. But, 77% in, I'm not 100% sure. He's winning it by almost 2-1. So if basically the vote that's left is 2-1 Collins, and there's 1/4 left, I'm not 100% sure, but it could end up being pretty close there, one way or the other. Paulding's easily gonna flip though. Cherokee probably just narrowly will not. Randomly up here, Rabin County. Okay, sure, why not? Whatever. Pfft. Apparently I missed that one. I don't know. All these are pretty close. Wow, literally one vote in Madison County. So, because of the election day vote, absentee ballots narrowly going for Collins. So, based on that specifically, I think Madison County is going to end up going red. But if Dooley ended up somehow winning like the absentee ballots or something, then Dooley would win it because you end up getting like 1 or 2 votes after election night that would come in there and that would flip the county, to be kind of funny. But it appears that's not going to end up being the case. And so, you end up with this. And we still are waiting for those 4 counties to do much of anything. I think that all 4 of these might end up showing up yellow for Burt Jones, but as of right now, it is still a little too... I'm going to say much. It's down to 7 points, so yeah, that's really not going to cut it. These could all end up being yellow. I think that one's probably... Montgomery's going to end up being yellow. Baker's probably end up being yellow. This one could end up being red, though, Clay. And then maybe Taliaferro, but that's probably going to be yellow because it gets part of this branch, more like. Very narrow. I'm not 100% sure if that's going to flipping for Jackson or not. Macon, probably not. Macon, yeah. And then you end up getting into, like, you know, are there 3 votes out there? Maybe. Maybe there are. You know, but if you look at the early vote specifically, then, I mean, you know, I don't know. There's not really much out here, right? So, probably not. Probably not. But, you know, the surrounding area, that's not very red, so, I don't know. Probably going to end up being a yellow county for Baker. Or, yep, this one. Thank you. If I had to guess, probably going to end up being yellow. Probably going to end up being yellow. Probably end up being yellow. And I think this one might end up being red just because it's a little bit more, along with these guys. These are a little bit heavier. But, you know, Calhoun, I don't know. No, actually yellow. All the 4 that are left are probably ended up being yellow. Randomly, Washington County being in the middle, the yellow being red is a little bit interesting. But, Lawrence County is in fact not gonna have enough to flip. I don't know why I actually put it that way. It doesn't really look right. Wheeler is narrowly red. Dodge is, yeah, relatively red, though. Not necessarily enough to actually, like, get anywhere close to pressuring, but that's probably ended up being a yellow county nonetheless because it is within a large stretch of support for Burt Jones. It appears to be somewhat regionally based. I mean, there's a little bit in, like, southern Atlanta suburbs, mostly just Henry, going into, like, the Spalding exurbs. But you know, he still has some specific regional appeal here. And then you also take a look at where, but and then we compare that to the Senate, and it's just very obviously just Atlanta versus not Atlanta. And then randomly just Rabin County does whatever it wants. I had to guess here, Collins is probably just going to win all 4, just because they're not in the Atlanta region. And they don't necessarily have any urbanized areas, right, like Richmond or Chatham do. So with that, it's probably going to be being favorable to him there, but Coweta probably flipping. Meriwether's only yellow by 1. We're looking at Paulding, which is only yellow by a few. Cherokee might not flip. I'm not 100% sure. Depends on how considerably close it ends up being right now. Currently at a no. Forsyth, 3 points. It's really going to be down to how heavy this election day vote is for Collins, which is 61-39. So that's a heavy maybe leaning no. And then you go to Hall, where Dooley's ahead by 5. You got a third of the vote left. That's probably not going to end up flipping. But Walton almost certainly is, because that's about, I don't know, actually. I think I might end up sticking around to be for Dooley. So something like this, and then like this for both of them. Did guess who won by more? The answer is Mike Collins. Checking up on the ballot question, no is obviously the winner. I don't know why they haven't called it yet. It's down to just Cleveland, Oklahoma, and Tulsa counties. Wouldn't be surprised if Cleveland actually gets even closer as the night continues. I mean, election day, we're at no plus 17.6%. So, again, really looking pretty brutal there. Early vote is actually no plus 15. So, really just looking atrocious. And so we were looking at 95% in. Muskogee, no plus 9 isn't actually that bad. But, yeah, 2%. Yeah, literally, like, what happened, dude? Literally at midnight, it was at 67%. 2/3 chance of passing. Yeah, betting markets aren't everything. But, yeah, I mean, also, yes, there was a 1/3 chance that it wouldn't pass. But, you know, to completely miss it and lose by 12 or 15, probably closer to like 18, 19 is a little bit crazy. I mean, that's worse. This, in a low turnout environment, and everything else, this is going to do worse than the Democrat did running against Kevin Stitt in 2022 for governor. That's pretty rough. That's pretty rough. Stitt only won election by 13. So, you know, in Trump plus 32 Oklahoma, that's really a subpar performance. And if you're getting worse than that, as something as, like, you know, generally nationally popular as increasing the minimum wage, yes, they're more than doubling it, but still, it is with specific exceptions for things like family farms and stuff like that, and minors and, you know, whatever. More than 95% in Cherokee and is no plus 3. Cherokee generally votes like a point or two to the left of the state, so you'd think maybe it'd be a little bit closer, but again, then you do have, like, yeah, Osage, wow, that's crazy. 20 points for no. Kind of surprised here. But, yeah, they, in fact, have rejected a $15 minimum wage in the state of Oklahoma tonight. Alabama U.S. Senate, we're now at a quarter of the vote in. Barry Moore is leading still. And he's leading basically where all the cities are. The only one that we're really waiting on that has, like, any sizable votes is Shelby County with about 20,500 votes. But Jefferson, very little in, but Hudson's winning by a good bit. Moore, very little in there. Morgan, pretty good. Quarter in Mobile, so it appears that Moore is going to, in fact, win Mobile County. But, I mean, a lot more out of places like Jefferson County in order to really be able to see where this is going to be able to go. Because Hudson really needs to get a lot more of a margin in places like Jefferson and also squeeze out what he can in Baldwin, in Mobile, in Madison, if he's not going to be picking up any of the rurals or even amongst the black belt there, which is actually going to be a lot of white voters for Republicans. But, you know, if it was the Democratic primary, then, yeah, which there is here. So it appears that you can see Lariat is doing really well with black voters. Not absurdly well, because she's losing Mobile. But, you know, you can see that she's doing pretty well there. And amongst some white voters in this area, it's kind of weird that she's losing Jefferson County, though, but oh well. Oklahoma governor, Drummond, narrowly leading. Still, it appears to be going pretty slow. 2/3 of the vote is in now, though. Well, approaching 2/3 in. And Not really much. Alabama U.S. Senate still only a quarter in. We still, again, need a lot more out of some of these bigger counties, really eyeing Jefferson County, because if Hudson can, like, squeeze 70% out of Jefferson, then he might still be able to be in it, but otherwise, it's looking pretty good for Barry Moore. He's getting the numbers that he needs from every single city except for Birmingham, which is really going to be where he needs to net a lot of votes in order to, come out on top of this contest, and so that's going to be the big focus for that. Currently still also waiting on Shelby County, which has a lot. It's a more like exurban core county there, just south of Birmingham, a lot of Republican votes. So 20,500 on the line. We don't have a single vote in yet for how things may end up going there. Walton has, in fact, held for Dooley. Troop flipped, and so did Coweta. Douglas is not going to. Not surprised. Cherokee probably will squeak by. Forsyth. Forsyth's really, really close. Georgia governor. Rick Jackson now ahead by 6% flat. 6% even. And so still awaiting the 4 counties that apparently do not want to count votes. We should call them all California County. And it appears that this is probably relatively close going to be the end result map. For Rick Jackson v. Burt Jones, Rick Jackson probably winning by about 5.5 points at the end of the night when all is counted up. Now, there is still one contest that happens later in the night, which is this special runoff. Closes at 11, not runoff, primary, but I do not hate myself. I will not stay up just for one California election. That's probably just going to have 2 Democrats progress. Not really stay up, but, like, stay doing this, which, I enjoy doing this, but, like, down to 5.8% or so, 5.82%. Georgia U.S. Senate still going up for Collins. And we're now at about 90% reporting. So at this point, it's probably going to be relatively stagnant. We do have officially county reports finally coming in from Tafiero County, and I did properly guess both. Perfect. And also for Washington, it appears, was relatively easy to guess. But yeah, why on earth is only 99.8? I don't understand why they think they're like so cool or whatever, just to try to be against it. Like Barrymore definitely leading. Still only 3% in Jefferson County, but he seems to be solidifying himself in the other urban cores, and it's really going to be difficult for Hudson to be able to catch up even in Jefferson County, just because of the amount of votes that are left in these areas. That probably Moore is going to be leading in these counties. Plus, he's leading by a lot in Madison County. He's leading by a lot in Mobile County. He's leading by a lot in Baldwin County, right? Those have a lot of votes in them, and so where you're looking at the number of There's another county drop. That was in Lee County. Yeah, Lee County, wherever that is. There it is. Lee County. Yeah, okay, netting 1,100 votes for Moore. Yeah, apparently statewide we did have some like up to 30-point shifts in the vote in Oklahoma, but still not enough, obviously. 34.3% state, and you're getting shifts anywhere from 25 to 35 to 40 points in some counties. Still not really going to be enough to make it, pass by any margin there. Okay, there we go. We now officially have, advancing. They do have runoffs? Okay, well, they projected that Drummond and Mazzei are going to move on to... Is that going to be a runoff, or is that going to be a convention? Not 100% sure. Yeah, Oklahoma State question has failed. There they go. Finally, they made one 2 minutes ago. They made a projection that it is going to fail. We made it at, like, 9. But yeah, that's probably gonna end up. It's probably gonna end up failing by about 16 points, which is very disappointing because that's only like halving the margin that Trump had in the state. So pretty brutal considering that it's it seems to be a relatively popular measure, but apparently when you put it to votes, maybe not as much. Maybe it was just how far it went. Maybe people weren't ready for $15 an hour in Oklahoma. Then we look at Rick Jackson now up by 5.6%. And so it's getting closer, but still not going to be enough to really flip things. Rick Jackson is still going to be the nominee, unless something like insane happens. So Rick Jackson is going to go on to challenge Keisha Lance Bottoms in the general election this November. Keisha Lance Bottoms is favored by a lean margin currently, and so that is going to be a flip for the Democrats. If that does end up happening in November, Democrats will flip a seat there. It is currently held by Republican Governor Brian Kemp. The Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones did not win the nomination here, and Rick Jackson is definitely the worst out of the two there. Meanwhile, if you look in the U.S. Senate, you can see Mike Collins defeated Derek Dooley. Some people think that Collins is stronger. Some people think he's weaker than Dooley. Not 100% sure which way I actually lean currently, but either way, there's no where if you're looking at the fact that they're running against John Ossoff of all people anyway, it really doesn't matter, right? There's not much of an electability argument. Ossoff's going to win by probably 6 to 9 points or so. But honestly, it's really not going to make too big of a difference. Now, with a third of the vote reporting, we're looking at a strong win for Barry Moore, and it doesn't really matter anymore at this point when we're looking at heavy enough margins in some of these counties. It's really not looking that bad for Moore. I'd be disappointed if my name was Jared Hudson, because it's really looking pretty rough out here for him currently. So that is probably not going to end up going well for him. I definitely want to be Barry Moore. It's not enough to quite make a projection yet, but still not looking fantastic. And so, still awaiting a few more results. But you're down by 20 points with 33% of the vote in. I mean, you got what, 2/3 of the vote left, but still, whoa. Whereas you're just, yeah. Also would be surprised if Hudson only does well in like the greater Birmingham area, and Hudson win or Moore wins like everywhere else. Calhoun, Talladega, looking a little bit stronger there, but not quite. So if you hold on, the Georgia numbers, we're probably looking at Rick Jackson +3 at the end. Honestly, if you look at the fact that he wins the absentee ballot, it's probably going to drop a little bit. Oops, I did not mean to do that. Probably going to continue to drop a little bit more as it keeps going. But I mean, it's really going to be down to whether or not you can as, Jones be able to squeak out a little bit more here and there to be from the election day vote, which is still coming in at this point. I have no idea why they let me use pro stuff. I don't pay them crap. And so again, looking at Derek Dooley, and he's obviously not doing phenomenally. He's gonna end up probably losing by 15. Maybe not quite that much. More like 14 points. Still gonna end up having Merriweather flip. Hall is narrowly gonna hold on though, which is gonna be a little bit interesting. Same thing with Walton. Forsyth, I think, is probably gonna end up holding at this point. Then Cherokee is gonna end up holding probably as well. Douglas, but yeah, Merriweather's gonna flip. That's literally 21 votes with half the vote remaining. So then you still have Montgomery and Baker County, not a single vote in from either of those yet. So that's going to end up being the winner there. So if you end up looking at the Georgia U.S. Senate, John Ossoff versus Mike Collins is going to be the final result there. And yeah, John Ossoff is going to win by about 7 points or so in November. On November 3rd, he will win re-election. And I mean, as far as this goes, he's still whittling down the margin. Like, Burt Jones is going to hit 300,000. He's going to get relatively close. It's not going to be like a blowout election like it was for Collins v. Dooley here for Senate. I mean, I say blowout. It's really not. That's only a 12-point margin, right? That's really, it actually looks about as not bad as it actually is in the popular vote. Usually, because of urbanization for Democrats is so strong for them that it ends up looking really, really bad in Georgia when it's actually not. For example, here, the only thing saving them is like the black belt. But if you look at that right there, that looks really, really bad, like they lost by a lot. But no, Biden wins Georgia in this map, right? So where you have an environment where it's so dependent on such a very, very small chunk of the state based on land area, it looks really, really weird. And so this, if you did the numbers right, if the Democrats won these counties and you gave them the right percentages, they could win statewide in Georgia with this map, right? But for Republicans, because Republicans don't have as many voters in this area, this is basically a very strong win for the person in red, here being Mike Collins, again winning by 12%, which isn't an absurd amount, but still a relatively strong margin nonetheless. And so he's going to be able to carry that to Election Day, where he is now going to face off. I'm not 100% sure who won the Democratic primary or runoff here. Oh, apparently they basically don't have anything in yet at all. They're at 20% in. 6 points right now for Everett West. And so, yeah, really not much happening there, but it doesn't really matter who ends up winning. Whoever ends up winning this is not going to end up winning. They will end up losing to whoever wins the Republican primary. And so, honestly, it's really just down to either Shelby or Jefferson. Whichever one ends up dropping first, that'll end up, definitely making things a bit more interesting there. So that's going to be the biggest. Rick Jackson, all up here, 93% in. He is leading by 5.5 points even. Again, the interesting thing is going to be based on like where these coalitions come from. So you have a big southern block for Burt Jones, which is a little bit interesting. This doesn't appear to be any demographic anything. It just appears to be more regional than anything, or potentially somewhat semi-cultural. Or maybe it's just the actual like southern white area, and then you have Rick Jackson with the greater, complete greater area, Atlanta area. Also a little bit into the Black Belt where you have some support here. Savannah, Chatham County flipped for Jones, which makes some sense considering that he is narrowly leading the election. I mean, down to Election Day is down to 5 points for Jones. So, as the vote has come in, Jackson has done better and better with the Election Day vote. So, it's really going to be difficult for him to be able to secure much of anything at that point if that's going to be how hard he's losing. So that's not good at the very least for the, Yeah, that closes. I don't really care though. Weiss at this point really not doing anything insane. And so, why does that show delete? I can't delete it from their list. Oh well. Again, Mike Collins. Nothing absurdly like intriguing about either of those candidates per se, to the point of like, you know, whatever, like 5.5 points right now. And then Georgia U.S. Senate, as of right now, it's mostly just like, again, Collins is going to go on to lose to Ossoff by about 7 points or so. It's really not going to be, you know, honestly, because of the national environment and also because John Ossoff is such a strong performer, a strong fundraiser, he is easily going to clear any opposition there. It's really not going to be down to that. And also Roy Cooper in North Carolina, like the same sort of thing. I'd be surprised if either of them get anything necessarily close in the general election. They're probably both going to easily win. They are both Alabama's taking a while to return like any of their ballots or count their votes right now, which is taking a while, and I'm getting a little bit irritated here. Um, well, still just waiting on that. It really seems to not be getting much better for Hudson there, where he's struggling. Even if he does get enough in Jefferson, I think that the margin that he's going to be. Let me flip over on this side, so that you guys can see it too. Even if he does get almost all of that expected vote, where it's plus 30 for him there, that is still not going to be enough to overcome the votes that are going to go for more there. So he's still going to be ahead. And then you also have all of these that might end up going for more as well. So, considering that we're looking at, okay, considering that we might be just really looking at a, really he's just doing well in this like central little hub area right immediately surrounding Birmingham, where there he's not doing well basically anywhere else. He's getting a little bit in like some of the western areas, but western central areas, but honestly it's just, I don't know. It's really not. Now it jumped to 50% in. Still basically nothing out of Jefferson, which is really irritating. But still awaiting quite a few votes more out of some of these other counties along the shore here appear to be relatively most of the way in. Probably showing some pretty good trends that should continue to be strong for more. Not all too many votes in those counties, but still it's going to end up being a few votes still, and so it's still gonna matter. But it's just I don't know. It's really not. I'm just waiting on like Birmingham or Shelby because if he can even win Shelby, it's basically over. If his Jefferson margin slips even like the slightest bit, then he's not going to be able to make it up. But honestly, it's really not looking like there's much that. Oh, they just okay. Not really much that Hudson can do at this point to be able to win. Again, GDHQ jumping the gun. They love to do that. But yeah, going back to Georgia governor here, specifically at the still nothing. Okay, one, and yep, I was right. They would end up being yellow, but we still got away from Montgomery. We don't really have to wait, but like whatever. And so Alabama, 50% in, waiting in on Jefferson there. Still got a good bit left to go. Shelby County would be phenomenal. If you could drop, that'd be awesome. If anybody could do much of anything, actually, that'd be great. I mean, are we counting with, like, all... Yeah, I mean, actually, Trump got more votes. Oh, never mind. 138,000. 131 to 79,000, so yeah, no, not really. Yeah, mobile down 11.16 and a half. I mean, still waiting on anything out of Birmingham, and so I believe it's the largest county in the state, but that's the vote margin, very little. You got a lot out of mobile. Looks like we got everything out of mobile. Still got a good bit left out of Baldwin. But yeah, I really don't think we're probably about a 95% chance that Moore is going to win. All right, so what we're still waiting on here is almost anything out of either Shelby or Jefferson. If either of those two drop, hold on. Oh. Okay, actually, we have a little bit. Okay, back to the Georgia U.S. Senate here. Mike Collins is ahead by 13% with how much reporting. It appears that he's probably not going to end up. That's 10 votes. He might end up squeaking by in Forsyth after all. And so that's going to end up dropping Then you also we have a projection to make, actually, real quick. We can project that Barry Moore has won the nomination for the Senate in the state of Alabama. This comes after just enough vote drops across the southern strip of the state along the Black Belt, and enough from Baldwin County to be able to make the final projection of the night tonight. Again, Barry Moore will be the nominee, and thus very likely the next senator from the state of Alabama. So here we now again have for the night tonight Mike Collins going to challenge incumbent Senator Jon Ossoff in the Senate. Jon Ossoff in the United States Senate. Ossoff is favored in the general election. Then we go to Georgia governor, where Rick Jackson, healthcare executive, is winning by 5.5% and will likely hold right about that margin. He will go on to battle against former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms in the general election in November. Keisha Lance Bottoms is very slightly favored. And in the Alabama U.S. Senate, Barry Moore will win the nomination. Unsure about the margins right now. It comes down to how far things go in Shelby and Jefferson, but it's not enough to matter to make a difference on who will win. And he is very heavily favored against who is slightly likely to be nominee Everett Weiss, who is currently leading the runoff, but we cannot make any projection there. But it does not matter because Republicans are very heavily favored there. Then also the final contest that we had was in Oklahoma, where Oklahoma State Question 832 to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour has failed. With 85% of the vote in, no is leading by 14.36% of the vote, and so that will end up failing, and the minimum wage will stay at $7.25 an hour in the state of Oklahoma, in what is a slight blow to liberals and progressives across the state going into 2026, and will almost certainly mean that they will not have any momentum to be able to flip the 5th congressional district this year. Even as it is a much redder district, it almost completely locks them out of it. And so that is all for tonight, and likely the last actual primary election live stream that we are doing this cycle. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, have a fantastic rest of your night.